Welcome to Better Odds Sports Betting. Here's our hosts, Kev O'Neill and Kyle Hunter.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back. Kev O'Neill here for Better Odds Sports Betting. I got my partner in crime, Mr. Kyle Hunter Picks, right here with a Utah hat. Maybe that's a tell for what's coming later in the show. And we have a special guest today from VSiN, Mr. Will Hill, coming on to help us out and help us get through some of these games. How you doing, Will?
What's up, boys? Glad to be with you. Always a huge fan of listening to the show. So when I get to come on the show, it's even more fun. And look, football season's here. Once it gets here, there's really no letting up because, man, it's all day Saturday, all day Sunday, great Thursday night game. So a lot of fun to have football back. Certainly is, man.
I mean, I hope people were able to watch the game last night as Prime members. I don't know. I'm sure a lot of login primes for Prime was passed around over the past couple of days here, but there's a few other ways of watching it as well. NFL Plus is kind of trying to bait you into that, but that's how things are going. And yeah, it was a cool game. It wasn't quite as high flying as people expected last night, but Chargers usually just did Charger things and made stupid mistakes and kind of had Kansas City on the back of their heels for a while and somewhat blew it. But certainly an entertaining game, I thought. Kyle?
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers had every chance to be in control of that game throughout. That pick six obviously changed the game a lot. But I have to say, how about the Chargers going for a touchdown instead of kicking the field goal there at the end of the game? That was wild.
It certainly was, man. I got to tell you, it's hopefully these Thursday night games will be good. A lot better than that Sunday night game we got, which was a snoozer. With the Dallas Cowboys there, you know. That
the only bad game of the weekend, really. I mean, the game Sunday, I mean, the 1 o'clock window was maybe the most bizarre window. I know every week in the NFL is crazy, but between the Pittsburgh-Cincy game, where every time you look up, it seemed like 10 minutes straight, Cincy's throwing the ball into the end zone, trying to win the game, you know, having one eye in that game, trying to follow what the hell was happening. Houston-Indy was wild. I mean, there was just so many back and forth crazy games. Carolina-Cleveland was another strange game. So it's funny, the primetime games were duds last week with the Rams and the Bills. Was a terrible game, awful game to watch. Never really a game, even though it was tied at half. The Sunday night game was a bore. We went like an hour without even getting a first down. But the games, 1 o'clock and even the 4 o'clock with the Giants and the Titans were great games.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly was. But we have some great games to talk about today. And, I suppose we're right before conference play here in college football, which is not always going to give you the best of matchups, but we're going to try to find you a little bit of value here getting into some of these games. We're going to start with SMU versus Maryland. And right now, Maryland is laying about 2.5 points. The total of this is 73. Kyle threw this game out to me. So I'm going to let Kyle start with this one to kind of see where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, first of all, I liked the over in this game, and I was frustrated that I missed out on the best number here because, I saw it at 70, and I was afraid that I should maybe kind of wait because usually these high numbers don't get bet up. And, of course, this one does. This one goes up. It's sitting at 73. I haven't actually bet this game. I still lean the over in this one. And apologies for my voice being a little off here, guys. I got allergy issues here in Ohio this time of the year, but we'll power through. Maryland has been really good in non-con games, to be honest. That's usually Loxley beating up on these weak teams. Then they get into the conference season and they're not very good. So we'll see what they're able to do here in this one because this is a good opponent. I still think that both of these offenses have a pretty good advantage over the defense. SMU has played really well this year. They rolled up 600 yards almost against North Texas. Mordecai is a good fit for this offense. They haven't missed anything with the coaching change. It's been tremendous all the way through. I think, Maryland is playing relatively slowly for me to want to take over 73, and that's the reason I haven't actually fired on it. If they were playing a little quicker, SMU's got the tempo. Maryland's got the efficiency on offense, not quite the tempo that I'd like to see. Talia has some really good wide receivers on the outside. Maryland's wide receivers are excellent. I mean, they were banged up last year and they were still pretty good. Now they're healthy, very good wide receivers. I think SMU's strength as a defense is stopping the run. That's not really what Maryland wants to do. I think both of these offenses will score quite a bit. Now, to be honest, I was leaning SMU as well when this was 3.5 and 4. 2.5, it's hard because you're not really above any kind of key number, obviously. So I'm still going to lean to the over, and I'm going to look at this one a little bit more. But you guys know it's hard to bet over 73. A lot of things have to go right.
Yeah, it certainly is. I mean, kind of like a little pat on myself on the back. I did get to 69.5, and about a half hour later after I sent it out, it went up to 70, like shot right up.
You're moving markets.
I don't think. Here's the thing. I think I timed it perfectly. Let's say. But either way, whether I influenced it or not, I just kind of saw it sitting there. And whenever a high total is kind of sitting there for a little bit of time, I'm like, this thing ain't going down. I better take this thing. And now we have options because it's up there. But at 73, to be honest, Kyle, I still like the over here. Not for a lot, but Maryland's just that team with Tagovailoa, which has NFL aspirations. Both teams are very suspect in the secondary here. Look at the how many points per game that they score, especially against the non-conference. And, they gave up over 30 points a game last year as well. Problem with right now is a lot of these teams, and you hear these podcasts and shows that are spitting out EPA and data points. That stuff means nothing right now until we get a sample size. I mean, what's the difference between Oklahoma's EPA when they played Kent State, and some other tomato can when it comes to a team like Penn State? They actually played Purdue, or there's a couple other teams that actually had some decent games, right? Notre Dame. So it's hard to use those stats, but, you go by last year and that, both teams return that quarterback. Both teams are very offensive based. Maryland scored over 35 points per game 5 times last year in a pretty tough Big Ten. And SMU did it 8 times. I mean, this game should be fast. I believe SMU is one of the top pace teams in the league. Maryland's pace shows a little bit slower right now because they probably slowed it down against some of those bad teams. I still kind of like it over 73. It's that high for a reason. What are your thoughts on this one, Will?
Well, my thoughts are you have my number. I mean, I don't understand this. You know that it's going to move up at 69.5. I'm looking through our text right now. I didn't get a text message saying, hey, bet over 69.5. Maybe Kyle got a text, but I mean, come on. I thought we were friends.
Usually a rainstorm happens when I send you that. And then all of a sudden.
That's true. I think, you make a good point that it's just so hard to get over 73. You have 1 6 or 7 minute drive that ends with a field goal or a missed field goal. It's hard to cover that number. And, you sit there as a bettor and you're doing the math in your head the whole time. How many, touchdowns do they need? Are they on pace? It's sort of an uncomfortable watch. Now, look, if you bet the under and they're just scoring every possession, that's an uncomfortable watch too. My lean to this game would be Maryland money line. I just think they have too many weapons. Kyle, you mentioned the receivers. Copeland's a tremendous player. I'm not sure what we learned here with Tagovailoa the first couple games. I mean, last week against Charlotte, who's just a disaster, 4 touchdowns, 4 incompletions. So he put on a show. So he's got a lot of weapons. Again, we don't know what it means here against the softer schedule, but to me, I don't know that SMU has enough defense. To me, it's like, last team with the ball kind of a game. I would lean towards a Maryland money line bet, probably in the minus 135 range.
Fair enough. So you have the side of Maryland. That's interesting. There was a movement from plus 3.5 down to 2.5 on the SMU side, but maybe that's an over adjustment here. Maryland at home, they can make a statement this game. I definitely don't have a side on this one, but I'll go with your lean here by what you're saying. Let's move on to the next game. Kansas versus Houston. Houston is laying about 8.5 now. There's a couple books at 9.5. The total is at 58. And Kyle, for personal reasons, I am a Kansas fan this year, and we are 2/3 of the way to their season win total over. I'm really hoping this will be the first season win total hit of the year. Over 2.5 wins is one of our biggest plays that we talked about in the offseason, being Kansas being so much better. And I was fortunate enough to give them away last week as the most likely dog to win outright at plus 420. So I was actually sitting in a sports book in Vegas with my wife. It was our anniversary. And, she sleeps until 9. So, I get up pretty early and head down there with the computer and just did a quick show just based upon me and you traveling. So I was pretty happy about that. But obviously, when's the value kind of go away from Kansas is what you got to think. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people adjusted their power ratings already on Kansas and moved it up. But does it still go up to the AAC's sleeper of the year, Houston over Cincinnati? I mean, if you look at the season win totals and the futures of the American Athletic Conference, it was like Houston and Cincinnati neck and neck. So you're always afraid about over adjusting upon what you saw the first couple of weeks. And I'll tell you this, West Virginia has their issues. And Kansas pretty much played a tomato can their first week. So are they going to be able to go to a Houston team that started out 2 games on the road? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to give you a strong lean to the plus 8.5 here. It's a tough one because it's a bad spot for Kansas, in my opinion. But just for what I've seen with Lance Leopold, maybe it's just too hard to over adjust them. Maybe I should be adjusting them more. It's still over a touchdown here. And Houston's offense has not been impressive to me. I don't like Holgerson that much. I really think that Kansas has a good shot. But if you like Kansas's side, I can still see this thing going down just on kind of like now the public's back in Kansas a little bit. I have no opinion on the total. Kyle, maybe you have something a little bit more than I do.
Yeah, I would bet the over if I were betting the total in this game, to be honest. This one's been bet down quite a bit. Somebody bet this one from 62.5 down to 56 or so, and now it's back up to 58, I believe. This is a game where Kansas's offense, I think, is still underrated by some people. Jalen Daniels is a pretty good quarterback. I think he's underrated. Look, Leopold's a really good coach, and I think Kansas is really easy to root for. And Kiev, I have the same season win total you do. So, but that's not the only reason I root for them, but that's certainly a nice cherry on the top, right? So I would say the big question here is how good is Houston? Because before the season, Houston was supposed to be really good. And before the season, what would this line have been? It would have been way bigger than this. It would have been a big line, 16, something like that. And now there's been an adjustment, as there should have been. And Houston has played really poorly, in my opinion. They shouldn't have won their first game. They had a post-game win expectancy of like 4%. They were very fortunate to win that game. Then they don't play very well against Texas Tech. Houston is negative 0.3 yards per play margin, which is 92nd in the country. And I don't think they've played teams that are that good to where they should be 92nd in yards per play margin so far this year, especially like Kiev said, a team that's supposedly be top team in the AAC, or at least second best. I've been really disappointed with their offense. Houston is 107th in yards per play so far this year, 117th in offensive success rate. So I think they'll have more success on offense because Kansas's defense is still pretty weak. They're going to give up quite a few points here. And Kiev, how about Kansas winning by 13 in overtime? That was an interesting one, right? He just goes ahead and runs back the interception for a touchdown. I'm sure that probably changed somebody's bet, whether it be live or second half or something. But
yeah, it did.
How is that allowed? Let me just jump in. How is that allowed? I was under the impression, and I've asked, rules officials on Twitter with this, hey, for purpose of the NFL, once they change the rules, can you have a pick six? And they said, no, only if it occurs in the end zone. My interpretation of each team gets a possession. All right, this team scored a touchdown. Then they get an interception. As soon as they have the ball, the game should be over. And I know that the counter to that as well. What if he gets stripped and the other team recovers? Well, that's a whole nother possession. That's a second possession. So to me, I was surprised they let that stand. I didn't think that was a rule. I guess I'm wrong.
Well, the ball's live. So it's not a possession until the ball's dead. So he could get stripped technically in something crazy. Now would pay to see that. That would be almost crazy as when the band hit that field in that old replay that they used to watch. Everybody came on the field and the guy laterals it to a touchdown. I can't remember what game that was, Kyle, but it's in one of the all-time classics. Technically the play's not over until it's dead. Of course, he can take a knee, and he didn't have to do that, which is probably the right move. But it's also the fact that, is it really a bad beat if you got beat from that? It is if they're controlling the clock and just can knee it out. So, but this is a different situation in overtime. Same with the 2-point conversion. Like if it goes to 2-point conversion, someone can pick it and go all the way to the other side and get 2 points. So that's an interesting way of looking at it too. I guess that's the best answer that I have. I wonder if they're going to look into that a little bit more, Will. And the thing about this game, really, that I'm excited about, and I tweeted this at Felica last week, if Kansas wins this and Duke's still undefeated, are we going to get game day in Kansas for a basketball dream, Duke versus Kansas, but completely undefeated in football out there in Kansas? I would be so pumped to see that, and game day's never been to Kansas, Will.
Yeah, and when you told me the games we were going over, you said Kansas, Houston. Is that, boy, that sounds like a great Elite 8 game or a great Sweet 16 game in the NCAA tournament. Not usually a football game we'd be talking about, but you guys bring up good points about Houston. Their offense has had issues. Offensive line has had issues. They've really had a hard time stopping the run. Both their opponents, the first 2 games where they could easily be 0-2, like you said, have rushed for over 100 yards. Texas Tech, and it's funny. They played four games, these 2 teams, 4 games combined. 3 of the 4 have gone to overtime. Both of Houston's games have gone to overtime. Kansas went to overtime last week, we just talked about. And look, Kansas to me has players. I lean towards Kansas in the game. The quarterback makes plays with his legs. They got a couple receivers. It didn't feel that flukish last week at West Virginia. It felt like a legitimate win. And you started to see the seeds of it last year at Texas when they played that crazy game and won 57-56. So to me, Kansas, they're obviously on the way up here. I would take them plus the points. I like Kansas.
Yeah, man, I can't disagree with that. I mean, with what Kansas has done, and that's kind of like what you got to do as a sports bettor. If you're key on a team, you're going to look, in 5-6 weeks that this team's 7-0 against the spread. Well, you want to be that guy betting on this team that's way undervalued, and you catch them first, right? And that's kind of the idea behind betting Kansas here is like maybe they're above the average team and people just aren't fast enough to adjust them. So that's my idea, and I think it's a great look right now, Will. And Houston's not looking good, and to be honest with you, I don't know Houston to really be able to get margin with Clayton Tune in the way that they play football right now. So I agree with you. This game I picked, Penn State versus Auburn, because, well, A, there's not a ton of massive games, but B, this is just an interesting game because Auburn's kind of in a little bit of a revenge spot from last year. And I don't know how much revenge it is, non-conference, but Auburn should have had that game in a lot of different ways against Penn State last week. But right now, it's up to -3 for Penn State, +3. Auburn's a home dog. Total is 48. I'm going to start with you, Will, and kind of see where your thoughts are on this game where, you're not too far from Penn State, but Auburn's obviously down south. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I almost don't need to know the teams. Once it's a non-conference game with an SEC team that's at home getting points, I don't even need to see the uniforms. I'm usually going to take the SEC team kind of blindly, similar to Florida, Utah in week 1, where, look, I mean, Utah could have easily won, easily covered. They had the ball first and goal through a bad interception. But I just think these spots it's tough to win on the road, these SEC places. Auburn's going to run the ball. Penn State, I don't think, is great against the run. They do have a good secondary. To me, I don't trust the Penn State coach, the Penn State quarterback on the road. I know you and I, Kev, were against them week 1 against Purdue. I'm still kind of getting over that one. That was a tough one. I just think Auburn's a good team. I would probably lean towards the under too. I think it'll be similar last year where, just kind of a grinded out game. I think the side and the total were both decided on that last drive last year. Remember when Auburn got stalled? I think they had first and goal, and their last play was, I think, a bad fade into the end zone. I think there was a controversial no call in the end zone. But to me, it would be Auburn. I would take them +3. I probably sprinkle a little bit on the money line. I think they have a good chance to win the game. I think they'll play good defense. I'm not in love with their coach either. I'm still, trying to figure out how they lost that Iron Bowl last year. That sequence at the end was just head scratching. But to me, I don't really trust Penn State on the road here. Give me Auburn plus the points.
Okay, Kyle, what are your thoughts on this baby? If I had a prediction, I think I know where you would go, but we'll see if I line up with the under.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to do with this game, so I'm not going to have anything strong in this one. I will say Franklin has been really good as a favorite, 51-34 against the spread, 60%. So he's kind of a front runner, I guess I'd say. He was one. Yeah, he was won a lot of these games that frankly, as Will knows, they've been favored by a lot, and then they go ahead and run up the score. So this one is not quite as pertinent as some of the others, I would think. But I think Auburn's kind of a matchup dependent team, right? Because they're all about the run on offense. They're really not good at passing it, and they're very good at stuffing the run on defense. Their secondary is a weakness. So the question here is, do you trust Sean Clifford to make them pay? Clifford, I mean, he is all over the place. There's some drives that Clifford looks like he hadn't ought to be playing, and there's some that he looks really good. I really don't know what to make of him, to be honest, and that's one of the reasons I like to not bet Penn State games. I think Franklin is a good coach, probably has a coaching edge on Brian Harsin. Harsin not in a very good spot at Auburn with everything that's gone on there. I think Penn State's better than Auburn, but 3 points at Jordan Hare. I mean, there's some crazy stuff goes on there. I don't know what to do with this one. I think Auburn 5th in pass rushing grade at PFF so far this year, and Penn State's offensive line has been really bad for years now. Guys, I think Penn State could have been really good if they just had a decent offensive line. They've been really bad on the line consistently. I think they still are. So I honestly don't even really have a lean. I think if I were forced to bet this game, I would bet the under, but I'm thinking Kiev might like it more than me.
It's warming up to me, especially the way you kind of broke it down with their offensive line. One thing we know about Penn State is they have fantastic secondary, and I know that Purdue game it didn't show as much, but I saw signs of talent there, and it's just when they get it together, I think they're going to look really good. Penn State's a weird team. They're very weird. They sometimes play down to their opponents, yet they seem to always find a way at the end, from what I'm seeing. I think this is going to be a fun game to watch, whether it goes under or not. The Auburn run game looks really good right now, but it's hard to judge them because they played 2 tomato cans themselves. And last week against San Jose State, maybe they're looking ahead to this Penn State game. They sure didn't really show up that well. I think they got to 24 points. San Jose State was in this game all the way into the end. A bet that I'm kicking myself that I didn't take. I did take this one. I did take San Jose State in the contest with my partner last week. Went 5-3, should have been 7-1, but I was unfortunately on the wrong side of Baylor and the wrong side of Pittsburgh. That both were overtime beats last week. But I have to say that Franklin, for as bad as he can be, he covers for you. And if he has the opportunity to cover a spread, he knows what it is and he'll do it. That's what scares me a little bit. But when the William Hill contest, the jerk William Hill, not the cool William Hill that we have right now, with their contest, they put this at 3.5. So I was really scratching my head on that. I'll be honest, I bought this at 2.5 on Sunday morning when this came out. Now I have some options, but at 3.5, there's going to be some sort of a buyback from me, and it might be half the amount. But I think it's for all the reasons that Will just said. SEC game down south, they're all getting up for this. I do give Franklin the coaching advantage over Harsin. I don't like Harsin. I think he's got all kinds of problems. I think there's just Auburn team is just too new. But right now at the 3, it's probably a complete pass for me. But I do have a strong lean to the under, but I haven't played it yet. I'm seriously considering this just based upon Penn State's offensive line and Auburn's inability to score a lot of points. Well, let's get into some NFL then, my friends. And as you can see, I got my Bears jersey on.
Super Bowl.
Super Garrett's 18-0, then Super. Yep. This might be the only week I get to wear this Bears jersey, so I'm just going to soak it up as much as possible. But we have some great games, and we have a huge game to start out with: the Chicago Bears versus the Green Bay Packers, because this is going to be your Sunday night game. Packers are minus 9.5 now. There's some books that are 10, but you should shop that if you like the Packers. But it's also got a low total of 41.5. And when you see low totals, you usually see some action on the dog, just in general for the numbers better out there. What are your thoughts on this one, Kyle?
Yeah, so I guess my question is, can we take too much away from that game from last week, 49ers and Bears, right? It was really sloppy, bad weather. Just kind of looking through the box score in this one, the Bears win despite getting just 3.6 yards per play. The Bears were awful in the first half, and they still win the game. 49ers Lance is still a big question mark and didn't play very well. It's interesting that the 49ers also had 12 penalties in that game, which, played a pretty big role as well. So I still don't. I mean, the Bears aren't good. I don't think Kiev would say that the Bears are good. So it's not like it's breaking news or anything. But the Bears aren't good. But the question is, are the Packers good? How good are actually the Packers? And you hear so many people, and I'm sure you guys hear some of the podcasts and videos and things like that. You hear so many people saying the Packers did this last year, right? They lost big in week 1, and then they just bounce back and they go steamrolling through people. I don't know. I mean, I think I'm questioning whether we should just predict what will happen this year based on what they did last year, because this Packers team is quite a bit different than that team was. I don't think the Packers are as good as they were last year. And, I don't like this is what happened last year or 2 years ago, so let's just say that's going to happen again. I would not want to lay 10 points here. Now, 9.5, obviously a pretty big difference. And there are 10s and 9.5s across the board. So definitely shop around. To be honest, I know Rodgers has owned the Bears, and he's talked about that so many times. And I'm not even a Bears fan, Kiev, but I get a little bit tired of him rubbing that one in. I've grown to not love Rodgers that much based on how arrogant he seems to be at this point. So, to be honest, I think under 42 is my strongest lean in this game, and the 42s are kind of drying up, going down to 41.5 most places. So, if you like the under, you probably want to bet it soon. I'm going to look at this one a little bit more right as we get off the air, to be honest. But I think under makes the most sense because I think the Bears, I see them as an under team in general. The Packers offense is weaker than it was last year. And 10 points is a spread that I don't want to lay the points with the Packers, but I'm not very comfortable taking the Bears either. Fields doesn't have much to work with there. So my lean in this game is the under.
Lean the under. Well, I'll let Will go before all my fandom on the Bears comes out.
I'll speak for Kiev. It's Bears money line, and then we can move on to the next game. Boy, it's a tough one because just from a spot perspective, the situation favors Green Bay. You have an 0-1 team, hungry, angry off a bad loss. The 1-0 team is sort of fat and happy, didn't expect to be 1-0. Now this is a situation where Green Bay can kind of get back on track. Like you mentioned, the team they've owned, not only straight up, but against the spread. So I would lean towards the Packers. Just this feels like a get right situation where they kind of, get their ducks in a row and run up the score a little bit, start to feel good about themselves. I just don't know if they have the firepower to do it. Their offensive line, their receivers, it's just kind of a broken offense. I will say this, though. I mean, if the kid catches the ball, Watson, and, they got stopped 4th and goal from the 1, that's 14 points, different game, or maybe having a different conversation. I know those things didn't happen, but to me, look, if you can find a 9.5, maybe this is a bit of a cop-out, maybe a 7-point teaser with somebody like Carolina, somebody getting 1.5 and you tease it up. There are, 7-point teasers aren't the most common thing, but if you can tease this down to Packers minus 2.5, I'd be surprised if the Packers didn't win this game, at least by a field goal or more. If the Packers ever started 0-2, then it's really panic time because, like I said, that roster is really concerning. There's not a lot of offense there. If I had to play it, I guess I would just swallow the points just because based on the situation, the track record, I think Green Bay is better than what they showed last week. I'm not dying to bet this game, though.
Well, for me, there's only one way to bet this game, and it's laying the points with the Green Bay Packers, unfortunately, man. And this was my first play that I made on the NFL Week 2 on Sunday night. As a Bears fan, I love the Bears, but this is not their year, and I'm still down on them. And if you watch that 49er game, the Bears were outgained 331 yards to 204. He had won 19-10. We always do a misleading final score article. It's out on the oddsbreakers.com. There was a 2-to-1 turnover ratio that helped the Bears. They grabbed momentum. It was also part of their Niners quarterback, Lance, being in that weird position. This is a bet I hit last week. I took the Bears +7 because I'm like, look, Fields was drafted in the same class after Lance. He's going to do something this game. And he did. There's some freaking playground type plays that he threw in a rainstorm that really benefited the Bears. But this is a big get up game for the Packers because Aaron Rodgers was a little bit embarrassed. They weren't as bad as they looked against the Vikings. As a matter of fact, their new receiver Watson dropped a for sure touchdown right in the beginning of that game. I think the Packers are prime for an easy upset against a Bears team that's just got new everything and are not quite put together yet. You can see that Fields was running for his life a lot, even in the rain. And the Bears just kind of almost lucked their way into this win. I'm happy that this over adjusted, because if you're looking at look ahead lines, this was probably more about -12, -12.5. I like the Packers up to 12.5, even if it hits the 10. Of course, get the 9.5. Very interesting. The low total might drive it down to teaser territory, Will. I hope so. But if it doesn't, then this low total almost tells me that the Packers are the right side. So even as a Bears fan, I'm in it for the money. I'm taking the Packers here. Anything under the 10 is good for me. Let's move on to the Titans versus the Bills. First Monday night game. There's 2 Monday night games this week, which is going to be cool. Hopefully they're not on Amazon or like some other crazy streaming service.
They overlap, though. They overlap, which I don't understand. I don't make the schedule. Maybe they should put me in charge of it. I don't know why they put the same games. They start an hour apart. Space them out a little bit. That's my little rant.
That's horrible. I agree. It's like there's no red zone for this situation. Right. Why are you even overlapping it? I guess they just want us to buy more TVs or something and put them into place. But Titans versus Bills, you got another big spread, -9.5. The total is 48.5. I think this spread moved a bit because of how bad the Titans looked against the Giants in certain situations where they should have really won that game. And the Bills, obviously, their dominant performance and extra rest against the Rams. So I'll start this one. The Bills are the greatest team in the NFL. I'm sorry. I have them number 1 in my power ratings. I see issues with other teams. I'm not seeing a ton of issues with this. And my biggest problem last week was their secondary, but their secondary actually showed up pretty well against this Rams team last week. The Titans, a little bit better than they should have been, but they let the Giants back in the game. One thing that was weird was the Titans giving up all those rushing yards to Saquon Barkley, because if you look last year, the Titans were number 1 against the run. So I thought that was interesting. I think it's something that they can button up this week. But it was really about the Bills' defense. And once the Bills' defense made their mark, Matt Stafford was baited into throwing 3 interceptions. And that's why the Bills scored a lot of points. If you remember, this was only 10-10 in the first half. I took the first half under on this one, guys, just for a lot of reasons. I think that there's a chance the Titans could have a goose egg here or something pretty low in the first half, just based upon that tough Bills defense. And I think it takes a little time for the Bills to kind of get going here. I mean, they have Diggs, but, they still don't have a couple of those key receivers last year, like Beasley. In my opinion, this is a lower scoring first half. Anything can happen in Buffalo. You can get wind. You can get rain, especially at night this time of year. I'm sticking with it under 26. It's at 25.5 now. Kyle, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I mean, Titans up 13-0 and then just lay a goose egg, lay an egg, I would say. What was that from them? They were +1 turnover margin and still lost at home to the Giants. They gave up 164 yards on just 18 carries to Barkley. I know Barkley is a good back and he'll have a nice season this year, but that's a pretty bad look for the Titans. The Bills defense holding the Rams to 3.7 yards per play, I think was probably the best defensive performance in the NFL in week 1. I know Stafford has some issues from time to time, but the Rams do have a lot of weapons, and 3.7 yards per play against them is really impressive. To me, if the Bills defense takes this next step, I mean, everybody else is in a lot of trouble because they do have big time playmakers on offense. I think the Bills are a deserving favorite to win the Super Bowl, so I agree with Kiev there. This price has gotten really expensive, though, as if you wanted to bet on the Bills. I mean, it's -10 most places this year. It's hard to bet -10 on the Bills against a Titans team that, made the playoffs last year, had a good season. They're not as good as they were last year, but this is not like some bottom feeder team that you're laying 10 points against. I don't have any strong opinion on this game. I don't even know what I would bet here. So maybe Will has something he likes in this one.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you here. I think, look, the Titans under was one of my best bets here for the season. I'm down on the Titans. The Bills, everything you said, Kev, is true. They're the best team. It's just, man, with the rest, how good the Bills looked, it feels like that you're just paying a tax on the Bills. I never want to pay a tax. If I could get a 10 and I had to bet it, I'd probably take the Titans. The Titans did beat them. Remember last year, that crazy Monday night game, Henry had the long run. Allen slipped at the end of the game. I think it was 4th down, and all he needed to do was just stay on his feet, and they were going to score and probably win the game. And then 2 years ago, remember they played that weird Tuesday night game in the pandemic season, and the Titans just absolutely buried them. I think that was the Henry stiff arm game. I think Josh Norman, where he just sent him flying into like the 4th row. So the Titans have played well here. Vrabel is a scrappy coach. Again, you got an 0-1 team that's desperate. and against a 1-0 team that's, maybe a little bit inflated right now. I guess you could talk me into the Titans +10. I'm not dying to bet it. If I'm not looking at it in front of me, are there 9.5s? Again, that could be another one. Not to use a cop out, but a 7-point teaser where you get the Bills down to -2.5. Maybe that's a reasonable bet. Just from a matchup standpoint, Greg Cosell, who does a lot of media, is great with the film stuff, made a good point. He says the Bills play almost exclusively nickel, like 93% of their snaps are nickel, and the Titans are going to use 2, sometimes 3 tight ends and just try to bully you, try to punch you in the mouth. So that could be an interesting matchup where the Titans can maybe run the ball, shorten the game. I know that Buffalo played great last week. I do still think if there's a weakness, it's the secondary, especially without White. I don't know how great they are at corner. I think they're playing a rookie corner as well. So maybe the Titans can pull the old, Parcells strategy here where they run the ball, shorten the game, use the clock, and hang around here. Tannehill, I didn't think was terrible last week. So if I had to bet, I would just say, the Bills are a little bit inflated. Vrabel's a good coach. You got a desperate Titans team. It would be a lean towards the Titans plus the 10 at 9.5. You know what? Find a 7-point teaser you like. Maybe at Green Bay from 9.5 to 2.5 with the Bills, 9.5 to 2.5. And play it that way.
Yeah, it's 9.5 on FanDuel. It's 10 juiced, a little bit on the plus side, minus 115 here. And this is FanDuel right here that I have up for the public to see. So many things. The Titans were giant killers last year, if you remember, and beating just all the good teams, and then they lose to the Texans at home. It's just very
and the
strange.
Jets, I think.
Yeah, yep. They're kind of similar to Cincinnati. Cincinnati lost to the Bears and Jets last year. I think Kyle knows pretty well about that. But
Mike White.
No, I think it's all fair. I can see a lot of different outcomes in this game. I just I still like the first half under. I don't trust the second half under. I think a lot of things can happen in the NFL these days with flags and everything. So really, really high in the first half under myself. All right, let's move on to the final game that we're going to talk about. We have the Vikings versus the Eagles. The Eagles are -2.5. The total is 50.5. So we're going to go to Wilf because he's a NFC East guy more than I am, and he might have a good beat on this game. I think it's a really interesting spread and a pretty high total.
I don't think we've talked about this. I'm actually a Vikings fan too, so not proud to admit it. That's probably why I haven't told you. They've broken my heart plenty of times, including in Philly in the NFC title game like 5 years ago.
How did you become a Vikings fan?
I don't know. It was when I was a kid. I don't know. I think I was into sports cards and I just liked the uniforms or something. It was not one of my best decisions in life. They've done plenty to hurt me along the way. But look, they looked really good in week 1. They're roping me back in. This could be a playoff preview, especially with Dak getting hurt. You got to figure Philly's in good shape to win that division. The Packers, we've seen all their issues. So, not impossible. These teams meet in like the second round of the playoffs. These are 2 really good teams. I have these teams dead even. So if there's dead even teams and the line is 2.5, I would just have to take the points. The only reason I haven't bet it, Philly plays a lot of zone on defense. Cousin historically, 2 things. He hasn't been good in primetime. Monday nights, he's been terrible. I think 2-9. He's very routine oriented from what everyone says, very sort of regimental, almost OCD-like, where he plays really well. That Sunday 1:00 window, if you get him in primetime, doesn't play as well. And he doesn't play well against zone. He throws the ball really well against man defense for whatever reason. Zone gives him issues. Philly's going to play a lot of zone. Philly did give up 35 points in Detroit, so they have plenty of issues on defense. Should be a fun game. Should be a good game. Like I said, these teams could meet again in the playoffs. If I had to bet it, I would take the Vikings. Again, you're not getting any key numbers, so you just have to win the game. Maybe the Vikings are a good teaser piece. Lean to the Vikings just because I have these teams equal.
Fair enough. We have a quick question. Any opinion on the Vikings Super Bowl future? If D stays healthy, NFC is softer this year. I took the Vikings to make the playoffs at even money, so I'm kind of on it. It could be that Cincinnati type team. Yeah, I think just depending upon another number, anything over 12-1, I'd feel a lot more comfortable betting them winning the NFC though, because whoever they're playing, the Bills or the Chiefs here in this Super Bowl, they're going to be dogs, and you're going to be laying juice just to try to cover your number. And it always sucks to have to hedge laying juice like that. So I would rather bet them to win the NFC personally. Kyle, anything on this question?
Yeah, I mean, I think both the Vikings and the Eagles are good teams. I think they're 2 underrated teams, to be honest. So I don't hate this. Obviously, it depends on what number you got. I think that the Vikings team this year should be much better, especially on defense, than they were a year ago. This is a Vikings team that really Cousins, like Will said, he's been bad in primetime, but in general, I think he might be underrated. He is a pretty good quarterback. In this game, I think Hurts is probably underrated as well. And the other thing that the Eagles, in my opinion, probably have the best offensive line in the NFL. So this is an Eagles team that I would rather back than fade. A Vikings team that I usually don't want to go against, but it is Cousins in prime time. So I kind of like the Eagles in this one. I also kind of like the over in this one. I think there could be some points here in this one because Philly will play quick enough to be able to get some points here. Minnesota has big playability. Obviously, Jefferson. I mean, you don't get many guys like Jefferson in the NFL. So if Cousins can be decent enough, then I think the over has a good shot. I think I like the Eagles a little bit more here because I think that Eagles offensive line can do some damage against most teams, and I think they will be able to move the ball a lot here.
This game is in Philly. Jalen Reagor is now a Viking. Do you think Jalen Reagor is going to get a tribute video before the game?
To dropping passes, maybe will. Letting Eagles fans know that. I think that this is really interesting because there's a great point how Cousins is in these big games and these primetime spots. He's been awful, but also you have to wonder if that was just Zimmer, making him nervous or whatever. He does have a new coach now, and this is the best Vikings team I've seen in a long time because they actually have defensive parts. The Eagles are one of those teams last year that beat up on the bad teams. This is like when they were favorites, you should have took them, and when they were dogs against teams like the Tampas and other teams, they couldn't really keep up, and it's because of the passing. Now that they have A.J. Brown, you wonder if that changes. And so the question is, what are you going to get if the Vikings are scoring points? This over is a freaking live bet all day, especially if the Vikings score first. I think I'm going to take the over, and I think it's just going to kind of make the Eagles a little bit more one-dimensional and have to throw the ball, and anything can happen when that happens. I think the Eagles will be good enough to put up over 23 points. I can give them that for sure. But that's dependent. I think it's a live bet situation. If the Eagles score first, I'm a little bit more nervous. I think they could slow it down and try to run the ball a little bit. I'm kind of back and forth on this, but what I will say is the Vikings are a good teaser leg. It's not the greatest teaser leg being a higher total. I'd rather have a teaser leg with a 44, 43 or something like that. But it's still a game that I expect to be close within 7 points. And the back door is always open, especially with a Kirk Cousins type team. This feels a little bit like when the Vikings went to Arizona last year and a lot of public was on Arizona, but the spread kind of stuck around the 3. Well, the Vikings ended up covering that, and they should have won that game outright. They kind of blew it. So this feels a little bit like that, but that was a lot of points scored in that game. So I'm going to give you a pretty good lean to the over with Kyle here. I think that's a very good look, and obviously live bet. It might be the approach that I take. All right, let's move on to the most likely dog to cash. And as I was fortunate enough last week, I'm going to be a little bit more tame this week, Kyle. I'm going to go from plus 420 down to around plus 150. BYU, I think, is live. I know that they're 3 in the hook right now at Oregon, and it's probably not the greatest spot for them, but this is what BYU has to stand on. It's not like the Big Ten and the SEC are knocking on BYU's door to try to come in the conference. And we all know that BYU was the football power back in, with Notre Dame and Pittsburgh and back into the old days. But I feel that BYU still has kind of a get up spot, and there's no way in hell that I want to lay points with a team like with a quarterback like Bo Nix. I mean, there's a reason why he's been so faded as a favorite here. I think Oregon's got talent, but they're just so new. There's a lot of players shifting around. And they beat the heck out of a team last week that it was more like a get up spot, and they caught momentum against Eastern Washington, an FCS team. I'm not taking that with any grain of salt here. I think that BYU is live because they returned a ton of production. They've got some great play from their quarterback as well. And it's almost like I said on the podcast earlier, age versus beauty, let's say. Age versus beauty, because the BYU kids are seniors and juniors, why there's a lot of kind of sophomores and redshirt freshmen starting for Oregon minus the quarterback, right? Jaron Hall, I like him, 67% so far this year, 3 TDs, 522 yards already. And it's not like they're playing tomato cans completely. They went to South Florida, which they struggled against last year, and really took care of business. And then against the Big 12 champion, they got it to overtime, and both teams shot themselves in the foot last week. But I think BYU is going to circle this game and go to Oregon and try to get the upset. So I'm going to take them. What about you, Kyle?
Kiev, I think there's quite a few that stand out to me as options for this week. So I'm going to be gutsy this week. Usually I take a smaller dog. Kiev takes one of the bigger dogs. So he takes a smaller dog. I didn't want to say this while we were talking about the game, but I think Kansas is live to win here in this one because I think yeah, I mean, what's this? Plus 360, plus 380. So this one's definitely up there. This could be the one that spoils our underdog parlay. So I apologize if it is, but I think it's worth the risk here. Houston has not really proven anything so far this year. Really good coach for Kansas. I think it's worth the chance here, taking the instead of taking the points here, you could put part of it on the points, part of it on the money line. I think that's a good way to go in these that have some variance. So I'm going to take Kansas here for the underdog play this week.
Oh, I like it. I think that's a game, like I said earlier, that could be a blowout, yet Kansas could win outright. So liking where you're going there. Will, you got one for us?
I'm definitely playing Kansas. Once the words 360 came out of your mouth, I mean, that's just 360, 380, get to sit there and root for Kansas football. I mean, that's my Saturday. I'm done. I'm in. Give me the Jaguars. I'm not impressed with the Colts. They had to play a fifth quarter last week against the Texans. They were lucky to tie. They can look at it, hey, we should have won. We missed a kick, but they played terribly. Ryan didn't look good. It's really, there's not a lot of offense. It's Taylor, it's Pittman. It's a suspect offensive line. I don't love their receivers. Jacksonville has, for whatever reason, had their number in Jacksonville. Remember last year they spoiled their season. Jacksonville really should have won the game last week. They had a chance to beat Washington, let that game get away from them. To me, this is sort of a toss-up game. I really like them plus the 4, and I think they have a good shot to continue their dominance over the Colts. So give me the Jags on the money line. I will say this, however, and maybe it's because he's playing in Jacksonville. It's a small market. You know what? He's young. Everyone blames Urban Meyer. It's not a great organization. It's not a great situation. That's all fair. Lawrence was billed as this generational, once in a lifetime, the next Peyton Manning. He's going on 20 games now. He has not been great. And look, Urban Meyer's been gone a while now. Urban Meyer didn't overthrow those receivers last week in the end zone. To me, Lawrence has not lived up to this idea that he's special, generational. Maybe he'll be good. Maybe he'll be really good. Maybe 3 years from now, this will look like a stupid take. To me, Lawrence has got to start to play better. It's amazing he doesn't get more, sort of grief in the media. Maybe he does. I don't listen to everything the talking head shows, but I have not been impressed with Lawrence, but I will take the Jags here on the money line.
That's been a great play. You know, I've been betting the Jags against the Colts every year, and it's been fantastic. I haven't done it this year because I was a little scared about what happened with the Colts last week, and maybe I should be. It's 3.5 right now. I love where you're going with this. I mean, the Colts have been terrible in Jacksonville for some reason. I don't know what it is. It's sometimes you can't explain trends that well, but there's some issues with Pittman right now, Will. He's actually highly questionable to play this game. So that actually,
and who's after him? I mean, it's really not a great receiver group. You guys are sharp. Be honest. Do you agree with my Lawrence take? Am I too hard on him, or has he sort of been disappointing?
It's too early to tell for me. I think he had a terrible coach last year.
He's been disappointing, and I think it's definitely one of those takes that could come back to burn you. But I think that so far you're definitely right. And I'm leaning toward Lawrence could be disappointing for the rest of his career, but I'm not so confident that I want to stand on that one big time. So I do want to go back and say too, I was looking at 2 different ones on the money line. It's plus 280 for Kansas. So I was looking, the other one I was looking at was plus 360. So I want to make sure I get that correct. Not trying to pull one on anybody, but plus 280 on Kansas.
You shorted us 80 cents, man.
Yeah, right. So, but
I'm still in.
Plus 280 still sounds pretty good to me for a game where I feel like, it probably ought to be plus 200 or something like that.
No, I'm with you. No, great stuff, guys. Fantastic. Love it. Great dogs we have. Hopefully they all hit. I always put a couple bucks on the parlay here, a couple bucks on our little money line dog. So sometimes you just need to hit one and you're all clear anyway. Just I personally bet the dogs a little bit bigger than the parlay. Obviously, parlay is just fun money. I never give something like that out. But we have a shot this year, and I really like where you guys are going. Will, where could our viewers and listeners get your great information?
I will be hosting First and Gold Sunday morning on Twitch, 11 a.m. Eastern. That's presented by Go Boys and Pickett, so you can catch that Sunday morning. And I'm on VSiN all week, Lombardi line, a numbers game, so catch me on VSiN. And then First and Gold Sunday mornings, 11 Eastern. This was a lot of fun, guys. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Kyle.
Yeah, thanks for coming on with us, Will. It's been a lot of fun. HunterSportsPicks.com, my website. You can go over there and sign up for the free picks newsletter. Nice start to the season here so far. 3-0 in the NFL last weekend, 15-5 last 20 college football. I don't have as many college football plays this weekend as I had last weekend, but I still like several plays pretty well, and already got a couple NFL up for the weekend. So check that out over there at HunterSportsPicks.com, and follow me on Twitter at KyleHunterPicks.
Make sure you do. Kyle was fantastic last year in college, 66%. So Kyle's been hot, and he's already started out how that is absolutely wonderful. Check us out, theoddsbreakers.com. We always have free plays. We always have good content for you to make your own decisions. If you ever like a capper or just want to be a premium subscriber, we have that available as well to get our plays before the line moves. Guys, thank you so much for coming on and tuning on to this show. I hope you have a blast this weekend, and go get some winners.
Thank you for watching Better Odds Sports Betting.